How's everybody doing for this fabulous Wednesday for Tea with Andrew? I know we missed last week. We had Thanksgiving. We had great times. I had a lot of family in town. Still not completely over the whole thing, so still a little tired from that whole event. But it was a great time. Hope everybody had one. Yesterday, I took the Train the Trainer with the Texas Real Estate Commission to be able to teach Legal Update 1 and 2 for the years 2022 and 2023. Fantastic course. I'm actually really looking forward to being able to teach the class because I think I got a lot of great information out of it. I think it's even more enjoyable of a class to teach than the last 2 years have been. So I'm really looking forward to being able to do those classes. But one of the things we talked about in the class, and one of the things we've actually been talking about a lot at the board level, and I thought it's important enough, it's not going to be a very long class, but it's important enough to have this conversation, is love letters. Love letters has become a huge topic and a scary topic about in the real estate industry. And what I mean by love letters is when a buyer includes a letter with the offer to the seller. The reason this is scary is because this puts both the buyer's agent, the seller's agent, and the seller in a very, very difficult position. The reason I say that is I'm going to read a rule right now from TREC rule subsection 531.19, disciplinary practices. No real estate license holder shall inquire about, respond to, or facilitate inquiries about or make a disclosure of an owner, previous or current, occupant, potential purchaser, leaseor, or potential leasee of real property which indicates or is intended to indicate any preference, limitation, or description based on the following: race, color, religion, sex, national origin, ancestry, family status, or disability. For the purpose of this section, disability includes AIDS, HIV-related illnesses, or HIV infection. Now, why this becomes oh my God, what are we talking about? This is just a letter from a buyer saying how much they love the house. The problem is some of these love letters can say, listen, I was at your house, I saw the cross on the wall, I'm Christian, and I would love to buy the house from a Christian. Bam, now you've got a situation where we're discussing religion. We'd include a family photo, a love letter. Hey, I'm a single mother of 4 children. You don't know how hard it is for me. I just want my kids who already fall in love with your home. Bam, you got an issue. They include a photo, and the photo, you didn't pick me because I showed you a picture, and the picture showed that I was of this race, this color, this religion, whatever it is. So the question now comes to, what do we do and how do we handle this? Basically, what the conversation at the board level in the board of directors meetings, and the same kind of conversation we got. There was about 70 people on the call yesterday who were taking the Train the Trainer course with us. Is sellers should flat out refuse to look at these letters. You should put it in the MLS. Now, to do that, you need to get a permission from the seller in writing. I do not want to receive any letter. You need to have this conversation with the seller right away during the listing presentation saying, listen, someone is going to offer to send you a letter. I strongly advise you refusing to look at any letter, love letter of your property, because if we do not choose them, they could come back and say, you didn't pick me because of my nationality, because of my religion, because I'm single, because I'm married, whatever the reason could be, they could say that we violated that act. It's a very dangerous situation and something that's coming up more and more. Oregon, the state of Oregon, has actually outlawed love letters in a contract. Now, that state has flat out said that they're not allowed. Texas has not done that yet. We're hoping that they do, because this is one of those things that can become a really scary process. It's a scary option, a scary conversation of, oh my gosh, these are coming up. There's no real true benefit in these love letters. I understand them. I've had clients that have forced me to send them as a buyer's agent. I don't like them either. The problem is you're trying to tug at the seller's heartstrings. I had a situation one time. I sold the home for a seller. One of the people who was trying to buy the home was a former student of his, and he's like, "Listen, I don't want to know who it is. I don't want to know anything about it. I just want to know sales prices." And I think that's the best way too. When I receive a contract, I don't look at people's names. I look at the sales price. I look at the loan amounts. I look at if they're asking for seller's contributions, paragraph 12B. Those are the things that I'm looking for when I'm going through a contract with my client. I do not even pretend to look at names. Sometimes that has come back on me where people say, hey, you should have known this was my client. Like, dude, I don't look at a name ever when I'm doing these contracts because I'm not going to use that bias when I'm going through and talking with my clients. I don't care what your name is. I care how much you're offering for the home. And that's all I'm looking for. The buyer is hoping these love letters is going to strike a nerve with the seller and get them to pick their offer over the other offers. We're in a crazy market right now. We've all heard that 1,000 times. I know it. You know it. We all know it. The question is going to be, what are we going to do to make sure? What we're trying to do is find a way to give ourselves a leg up on the competition. I get it. I respect it. But you, if you are representing a seller, have to be that sound guidance to your seller, saying, "Listen, they're going to want to try to sway you with emotion. Respect that, and I understand that. But our job is not to be selling our home emotion based; it's to be selling our home. Which one's going to give us the best deal? Because the problem is, if in any way you are swayed based on one of those things, race, color, religion, sex, national origin, ancestry, familial status, that is, in fact, we are violating subsection 531.19 by disclosing that information to you. It puts us in a bad situation. The real estate agent can be sued, and so can the seller. The conversation comes back is the decision might unknowingly or knowingly be made with bias, putting a seller at risk of discriminating. Example, a minority single mother shares photos, cute short video, and her struggles with raising 4 children alone. She expresses her excitement to raise her children in a diverse community. This information could impact the seller's decision to favor or not favor the offer. That is not what we are allowed to do in this situation. I can't disclose that. There was another conversation that was had in the class where there's a case where someone actually, an agent was selling a home in her neighborhood, just asked, hey, can you give me some information about the buyer, wanting to know who's going to move into the neighborhood, asked certain questions she couldn't ask, got a TREC complaint filed against her, and actually got in serious trouble for it. So guys, we've got to be very careful. We've got to remember in 2021, forever, but especially now in 2021, there's questions we don't ask. Color, race, national origin, sexual orientation, religion. Those are no-go conversations. We can't ask what church do they go to? Do they do this? Do they do that? Those are not conversations we're allowed to have. We can't even really say, hey, what kind of children, do they have children? Are they going to have kids in the area? That is also violating the familial status. So we've got to be very careful in this process. Brian, are you on right now? As a listing agent, do you have any conversation on this and thoughts? You're muted.
I was hoping you wouldn't even bother me on it because
This is, and the reason I brought it, I know you're on the board of directors with me, and I know you've heard these conversations coming up more and more. One huge advantage El Paso Board of Realtors has, Scott Kessner is on the Texas Real Estate Commission board. He's actually the chairman of that board. So we get to hear his voice in his conversation a lot when we're having these conversations. And he's seeing it more and more, and he's kind of the one who's coming out saying, we've got to put a stop to these love letters. Brian, I know you are a huge listing agent. Are you still seeing them at a large number, and what are you giving them to your clients when they do?
So obviously, I have changed my feeling because I feel like when things start to become popular, they start to become litigious, and therefore, now that it has become more of a comment, then yes, I'm addressing it a lot more than I would have in the previous. Because to be frank and honest, obviously, if it's supplied, I have to supply it, unless I have that conversation that says, hey, listen, I don't suggest you read this. I'm going to give it to you, but just push it aside, because as a listing agent, I have to supply every documentation over, especially if a contract is kind of brought to the basis of those details where they've shared it, right? If they've shared the detail, they've shared the contract itself, okay? If they've shared the contract with the detail, that is going to be the comment, right? Sorry, I'm trying to keep everybody down and volume on the background. So if they've kept those details, right, We just need to be responsible about how we describe it to the seller. It's the seller's responsibility, and buyer's agents. The thing that's missed in this conversation all too often is buyer's agents have very little liability in it. And you mentioned that it falls down to the listing agent that supplied that data. The buyer's agent, the buyer is not going to sue the buyer's agent for discrimination. They're going to sue the seller and the listing agent.
I agree. I think the buyer's agents do need to be careful, though, because I think they are in the same boat of violating TREC Rule 531.19. So if it does go before TREC, I think TREC is going to sit there and say, hey, you gave it to him, he gave it to him, all parties have violated, all parties will be held responsible. Now, there was a huge disagreement when we were the neat thing when you take the train the trainer course, it's all instructors. So you've got all very knowledgeable real estate agents. You've got multiple TREC attorneys. You've got multiple attorneys in the room who also do trainings throughout the year. And so what makes it really cool is you get a lot of different give and take conversations. It is a 6-hour course that takes a lot longer than 6 hours because of all the multiple conversations that we're having. And there was a big divide in the room. Some were saying it is not a part of the contract, hence you do not have to give it to your client. Some were saying you do. I strongly recommend, I said this earlier in the conversation, get with your client at listing time and say, listen, this is a new thing. It's coming up. They can sue you on this if you read it and don't pick their property. So I strongly recommend just give me something in writing, an email, something saying, I do not want to see at any time any love letters to my property. Just with that, I have your permission to not include them in it. And if you receive an offer, you can actually send the offer back and say, listen, I'm going to present the offer, but I want the love letter removed. That can be done, and that is the conversation that is going on across the state of Texas because it is a dangerous game that we are playing.
And it's unfortunate because there is the emotional impact, right? Because here's the other part, and this is where I think it's a slippery slope. And I know that I probably fall on the side of, listen, I see the value in what those letters do, but I also see what about, don't, by the way, look at your recorded ring bell, because if you saw what color they were, well, now you're in trouble in it, right? And by the way, don't ever be at your house indefinitely, because if they drive by and they stop and they talk to you, oh, by the way, that one bad. The problem is that we've opened a dialogue, and this is what I talk about all the time. We've taken a contract that when you and I started was 5 pages, 6 pages.
6 pages.
And now we're up to 16, 17 pages minimum, 21 pages minimum. I mean, when you factor in all the additional documentation that's come into play since then. So are we opening a dialogue that's going to get us in more trouble because we've set the tone that this is now something that they can sue on? And if they don't, tort reform comes into play and says that this is not something that is, because like I said, they could see them walk in. How many times do you see a seller sitting in the car outside of a house?
No, I don't. I think here's the problem. This is the pamphlet for Legal Update 1 and 2. This is the 6-hour course pamphlet to go over the 2-year change that is going to be taught to all realtors over the next 2 years. And a lot of it is law changes. I mean, and law changes are huge. It just last month in September, Texas passed over 669 new laws that went into effect. Some of those have to do with homeowner associations. Some of them have to do with landlord issues regarding notification of flooding. There's a lot of different things that went into effect that we need to know about. And the problem that we have is we are not allowed to say, I didn't know I wasn't allowed to say that. And if we are the givers of the information, and in this case, the giver of the information is, here's a picture or a letter of the person saying what religion are they or what color they are, whatever it is, we are the ones handing them that. I can't control them recording their own. They're going to be proof that I handed them a letter. And I think that's where the danger comes into play. So the answer is always talk to your broker, and 100% that is the answer of the day. But know that at a board level, that at a statewide level, the conversation is just completely and totally, we need to be very careful with these letters. And if we're talking about it, I guarantee lawyers are talking about it. It's something to think about, and something I want to pass on to the agents because I've seen it. I've been in too many conversations not to have this to be a tea with Andrew.
Oh, I'm going to charge my previous broker with a question that I know he doesn't want to answer.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Andrew, my client just called me and said, which offer or which house, which buyers were these? Were these the ones that came at 2:00 and the ones that came at 3:00?
Oh, you mean with that's, and that I've had that happen myself. We're like, hey, which were those ones here were 2 or 4, and we can tell them, hey, to my knowledge, they came at this time. It's a scary process. There's no right answer, and the problem is, I don't think we're often aware of any bias that we have. There's an unknown bias that we're seeing that you could fall in love with a couple because they have a 2-year-old kid that said something adorable, and that's why you want to sell them that house. Or they petted your dog in a certain way, and your dog was excited, and okay, well, if my dog likes them, then they're good people. There's no understanding of how, why, or when, but when that is used, I go back to one of my favorite conversations. We're all friends until I will use this letter in good faith. Now I'm going to use that letter against you, saying, "Hey, you didn't do it because of the letter that I wrote that showed you my religion, my race, my culture, whatever it is." So that's just a scary thing, and the fact that we're talking about it means it needs to be talked about. The answer is always go to your broker. What does your broker want you to do? But as far as I'm concerned, guys, love letters are now getting to be a dangerous game, and we're seeing lawsuits come up with them. So with that, you need to take that with the grain of salt that you want.
Agree, and that's the thing. But that's the devil's advocate in me, and that I look at it. Okay, the concern is me sharing that information, but what now if I share the information about what time they came, right? And that's the concern, and it is a scary game that we're getting into. And listen, this is why you make sure your E&O is up to speed. This is why you make sure you have a general liability policy, that you have a broker with a general liability, because these are things that are becoming items. And guess what? When you've just applied and tried to buy 5 or 6 houses, and now we heard about this a couple of years ago, and Andrew, I hope you remember this one, but a broker in Albuquerque was going around and purposely trying to trip up other brokers to end up getting the house. I think they end up, if I recall, the story was about 3 or 4 houses that they ended up actually winning in a lawsuit before somebody finally rose the flag that said, these guys are doing this for a living. They are committing fraud because they are trying to trip up agents. It's scary. Me and Andrew have been through a lawsuit that was terrifying because we had nothing wrong, but through technicalities and in one sense incompetence on the basis of the legal side of the equation and very good competence on the other side of the legal equation, right? We got ourselves in a bind where we knew that the contract stated one thing, but we never got to talk to a judge because we went through a non-legally trained magistrate at that. Luckily, in that particular state, they're now legally trained. But these are the things that you don't learn this in school, right? And you don't learn about the techniques and the ways that you have to be responsible. So yes, absolutely. Err on the side of caution. Hopefully your broker has given you some knowledge to this, because listen, I like love letters, but I'm definitely erring on the side of caution and having these conversations with my sellers because I want to make sure that I've fully disclosed my side of the equation. It's their decision after that, as long as I've disclosed.
And that is the answer. It is up to the seller to decide if they want to review them or not. But I guarantee if the seller gets sued, they're not friends anymore with you. And they're going to come after you and say, you didn't tell me.
As per our conversation is my favorite email.
Absolutely. And that's the key. Just guys, my goal is to make sure you know the rules, you know the changes that are coming out, and you're protecting yourself as much as humanly possible. The only way to have 100% protection is close your door and never do anything. We need to make sure we're minimizing the risks and doing what we can to do things legally, correctly. And at the end of the day, I still believe if you're doing stuff for the right reasons, you're going to do well in this business. Now, that being said, the road to hell is paved in good intentions. Almost all complaints, almost, because there's some horrible people out there too, but are from people who are trying to help and probably did something that they thought was a good idea, but wasn't at the time. So think about that, or be aware of that. be careful with these love letters, have those conversations with your sellers, and just think about that moving forward. Until the laws change, this is where we stand on it. So, and you will hear about this in Legal Update 1 and 2 over the next 2 years. So every realtor in Texas in the next 2 years will have this conversation again, I promise you.
Guys, and keep yourself, just as a last point, and we'll probably address it next week, but keep your finger on the pulse. The discussion right now is that people are attacking buyer side commissions, saying that they are not negotiable enough and that they are not competitive enough. There is a very good article that is on Keeping Current Matters right now that said that they did a study, and the Department of Justice did a study of 18 cities. And in those 18 cities, the commission rate for a buyer specialist rated between 2.5% and 3%. They are considering that non-competitive nature, which means that they are going to go through every tool and resource to try and get that. And the statement from the Department of Justice study was that they believe that the commission total, not buyer side only, the commission total should range somewhere in the range of 3 to 4%. This is a scary, read that article. It's on Keeping Current Matters. I think it's the newest blog entry. It is scary that that the Department of Justice has already brought up the fact that they wanted to publicly disclose the buyer side commission. But what's really scary is the way that they're interpreting this. And this is the same thing that me and Andrew had conversations about clear cooperation. That clear cooperation in black and white sounds amazing. In truth and reality, doesn't translate that well.
Oh no, it's a huge disadvantage for the smaller brokerages.
It's a huge disadvantage for your clients. You're telling the broker that they have to do something that may contradict what the client wants in their own favor. But black and white sounds great, and it fits in the box, but we don't live in boxes, okay? We live in the real world. And this is a conversation that the Department of Justice withdrew their agreement. And this is what they're challenging. And this is one of the, so clear cooperation is one, and this buyer disclosure of commission rate is another. I would venture to say that the anticipation is that, so we've always been told not to advertise a rate, correct? But when I read this conversation, they're saying, well, let's go ahead and advertise a rate. That kind of doesn't make sense.
I think what they're trying to do is, I think they're trying to catch buyer's agents who only look for the good prices. And the conversation is, okay, if you're only showing me houses at a 3% or 3.5% commission, what about this really good house for me right here that's only 2%? And I have no real issue with that. Honestly, I don't. I don't have an issue saying, because it's no secret. Every realtor knows how much is the buyer's agent is going to receive in the MLS. It's not a secret, and I don't think it should be. I don't necessarily think it should be. Right now, it's one of those things that's not talked about, so I don't talk about it. But I think where they're coming from makes sense in that, okay, well, the buyer's agent should know.
Black and white makes sense. Tell me why in the study they disclosed full commission rates instead of just buyer agent commission rates. And that's the question, right? And that's where, like I said, guys, we are in an interesting time in real estate because now everybody's an expert.
Oh,
everybody's an expert because all you have to do is type it into Google.
Yeah, I was actually at dinner with an attorney last night, and he has a coffee mug that says, "Don't mistake your Google, your 30 minutes of Google with my law degree."
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I think that's a great topic, and we'll kind of explore it more. And when Andrew reads that article, he's going to be like, "Oh my goodness, yeah!" Because
and that's the thing is, we start if the DOJ starts coming in, and it sounds like it'll definitely be our conversation next week. But I mean, just on the top of my head, if the DOJ starts saying what the buyer's agent has to be, well, that takes away negotiations with the sellers and their clients. If I have to pay a 4% commission to a buyer and I'm only getting a 5%, I can't afford to do this listing or whatever we're going to do.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. They're actually disclosing what the entire commission should be,
which goes against everything the anti-Sherman trust law says. So that's good. I'm looking forward to that for next week. We'll have that conversation and we'll move forward with that because that's some crazy stuff.
Oh, thank you guys.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week, and we'll be talking about anti-Sherman trust laws. So appreciate it. We'll see you next week.